In the online business world, we love to talk about our dream clients, the ones who respect our time, pay on time, love your work, and send you glowing testimonials and refer you to all their friends. But something that we don't talk about enough is what happens when things don't go that smoothly. Because if you work with enough clients, eventually you are going to have to fire a client or you will get fired by one. And when that happens, it can feel really, really awful. You will probably be embarrassed, angry, feel like you failed, especially if you care deeply about your work and your clients, which I know you do. But it's not the end of the world. It's just part of doing business. So today I'm going to share some personal stories about times I've had to fire a client, times I've been fired by a client, and a time that we mutually decided to part ways, and what each experience taught me about boundaries, alignment, and running my business with integrity. These moments, while extremely uncomfortable at the time, are the ones that help you grow the most. And I really think that that's something that we need to remove the stigma around talking about. So that's what we're doing today. Welcome to the Six Figure Brand Podcast, where each week we're pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to build a six-figure business as an online service provider. I'm your host, Morgan. I'm a branding expert, online agency owner, mom of two, and military spouse, and I'm obsessed with helping entrepreneurs like you understand the ins and outs of branding so that you can use it to grow your business without sacrificing your sanity. Whether you're just starting out or focused on scaling, we're diving into everything you need to build a profitable and sustainable online business. Let's get to it. All right, so I have 3 real-life stories that I'm going to share with you today, and I'm going to try and be respectful about how many details I give, so please don't DM me on Instagram and try and sleuth out who these clients are, because I'm not going to tell you. That's not the point of the story. First, we're going to talk about the first time that I had to fire a client. So I had to tell them, hey, this isn't working. I think we need to each go our own way here. This person was a coach and they were a host of a pretty popular podcast, and they came to me as a referral from a former client. At first, I feel like we were pretty well aligned. One thing that maybe should have been a red flag but wasn't to me was that her website was on a platform that I was unfamiliar with, but I was really open with her about that, and she seemed like it was no big deal, and she understood, and she was happy to kind of let me learn her website and learn that platform as we worked on things. Other than that, we had clear goals. She had really great energy. I was excited about the project. And it was one of the bigger projects that I had booked at the time. So that was really excited for me. But as things progressed, they started kind of going off the rails a little bit. She started going way out of scope, adding extra tasks and expecting deliverables that weren't part of our agreement. But also, I was unsure if that was even possible with her current platform, which 1, I was unfamiliar with, but 2, was fairly limiting in what you can do. And also just blurring some lines on some boundaries of mine. There was a lot of sending me text messages, which I am pretty clear with clients that that's not a way that I like to be contacted, and that type of stuff. And I tried, or I thought I tried at the time, to set very clear boundaries and clarify expectations. But in hindsight, I think that's something I could have done better on, and I do better on now with clients. So that's definitely where I own some of the breakdown in their relationship. But it just kind of got to a point where she was piling on so many more asks than I could get through that I really felt like I was drowning. And I started to have, honestly, a lot of anxiety around working on the project and having to send her updates and tell her I wasn't able to get through everything, or I didn't know how to do some of the stuff she was asking for. So I think it was the combination of the scope creep and also trying to build the plane while I'm flying it as far as learning a new platform goes that eventually just really got to me. And to be honest with you, I just hit my breaking point and realized that this isn't good for either of us. I'm not happy with the project. She's not happy with the results she's getting. And I think it's time for us just to go our separate ways, and hopefully she can find somebody else that can get her what she wants a little easier. So the lessons here that I learned were, first and foremost, to really stick to your scope of work. Scope creep is one of the fastest ways to lose profitability, but also to just burn yourself out. And secondly, just how to more respectfully but firmly hold my boundaries. I now am of the mindset that boundaries with clients are really one of the kindest things you can do for them, because it sets the expectation on both ends. But I think mentally I was not quite there yet during this project. But all that to say that This client has since reached back out to me. This was many years ago, and asked for like a few little things here and there or questions about things I did on her site. And there's no bad blood. It's totally fine. She understood. I obviously was pretty apologetic whenever I told her that I didn't think I could help her out anymore. And it was a lot worse in my head when I was anticipating having to do that than it really turned out to be. So firing a client doesn't mean that you're bad at business or bad at your craft or that you should go back to corporate or whatever. It just means that you thought this was going to be a good fit and work out, and it's not. And maybe parting ways is the kindest thing that you can do for both of you and is the most of service solution for your client. I think that knowing when it's time to call it is so much better than trying to force something that's not working or finish a project that you don't feel good about or under deliver for your client. And ironically, a lot of people will say, oh, well, then she's going to say bad things about you online or whatever. That didn't happen, first of all. But also sometimes letting a client go when it's time is the best way to protect your reputation. Because like I said, continuing might mean delivering subpar results, and that probably is something they're going to talk about. I know from my end, if I hired a contractor in my business, I would have so much respect for them being honest with me and telling me, hey, I actually don't think that I'm your person for this anymore. Let's figure out a way that we can end this in a way that works for both of us, versus somebody continuing to try to basically fool me into thinking that they can deliver on something that they can't. So in this instance, some red flags to watch out for would have been clients who ask for one more thing and one more thing and one more thing, and it starts to really pile up. Also, maybe a little bit of vague deliverables or unclear expectations from the beginning, and a pattern of boundary pushing. So clients are going to push your boundaries. It's just the way that it goes. And once or twice, for me, I feel like is not that big of a deal. I kind of try to get them what they're asking for and also kindly remind them what the rules are. But if that becomes a pattern, then that's really something to watch out for. And then the biggest thing for me, which I fortunately did notice this happening, was when you just start to feel drained and anxious and really dreading working on the project, your intuition is telling you that something's off, and it's important to listen to it. Now, on the flip side, I have also been in a situation where the roles were reversed, where clients end things with me. And that one stings a little more. So let's talk about when you get fired by a client. This one was actually a little bit earlier in my career than the previous story I told, but this person was also a coach, and same thing, like started out pretty standard. I honestly couldn't even tell you where this client found me from, but we went through my standard intake process. She had some really great ideas of how she wanted her brand to look. I will point out here that at that time I was just doing straight brand design. There was no strategy involved. And in hindsight, that could have probably been part of the problem. But this was also at a time in my business where I was busier than I ever had been. If you've listened to past episodes, you know I experienced some pretty severe burnout in like late 2019. And this project directly contributed to that. I will be very transparent in saying. But so yeah, the project started out fine. Things were looking good. She was happy with all the drafts I was sending her. Then I do think that I dropped the ball a little bit as far as timeliness and not getting to things as quickly as maybe I had initially promised when we first talked. And the client started to get frustrated by that. She wanted everything now, which was not realistic, but I was also not super clear about realistically what the process would look like, how long it would take. And from my end, like I definitely was taking longer in between drafts than probably I should have been. That said, the actual work was solid. She was happy with everything I was delivering, but it just got to a point where she basically said, this is taking too long. I need it to be done sooner. Please send me my files and I want to cancel our contract, is really the short and sweet version of it. And that sucked to hear. That was really hard. And it also was a big wake up call for me of like, okay, something's got to change in my business. And shortly after that is when I hired some support and slowed down a little bit and really took a look at the way I was running my business and how I was serving my people. And that was a huge and very, very important learning experience for me. In hindsight, I don't think that client ever launched their business. So I think it's highly likely that there was some other stuff going on behind the scenes that I was not privy to that maybe contributed to some of that stress and sense of urgency and all of those things. And I think that's a really important reminder that you don't know everything that your clients are dealing with outside of your guys' project together. So there could be business things or life things or who knows what going on that is affecting how they're showing up and how they're communicating with you and what their expectations are that frankly you're never going to know about. So just always like keep that in mind, that they're living a whole life that you are not privy to, and that could be heavily affecting the way that they work with you, or if they decide to part ways with you or whatever. I think the lesson here is that being fired by a client feels like you failed. And I know that in some ways in that project, I did fail, but mostly what it means is that our expectations just weren't aligned, and both parties play a role in that. Now I have taken that and made a lot of changes to my process, the way that I work, who I work with, all of that stuff. And I would have never learned those lessons if this hadn't happened. So while it was a huge blow to my ego at the time, I'm so grateful that that happened then so that I could get to where I am now. And I know that sounds cheesy, and especially if you're have recently been fired by a client and you're really in your feelings about it, you're going to be like, yeah, whatever, Morgan. Once you get on the other side, I am confident you will agree with me too. And finally, just to not take it too personally, which again, when you're in it is hard, but a lot of the time, like I said, it's not about you. It's about them. And there are factors going into it that you will never know anything about. So instead of taking it as rejection or failure or whatever, try and look at it as objectively as possible and ask yourself, how can I avoid this happening next time? What was not communicated that should have been? How can I make things more clear for the next client? And some red flags that you can watch out for, from my case specifically, would be clients who are more focused on speed than quality, clients who maybe resist your process a little bit. They're in a hurry, so they want to skip steps. In my case, I see this happen with clients who say, oh, no, I don't need strategy. I just need a logo. And now I know to tell them, okay, well, that's fine, but I'm not your person if that's how you want to do things. And communication that just starts to feel like patient or transactional, it was not a huge surprise to me whenever she finally said, okay, I'm done. Give me my stuff and I'm leaving. Basically, because our communications had started to get not like breakdown, but she was getting shorter with me and felt a little more demanding. And I'm pretty intuitive in that way. So I could feel that things were off before that happened. And then also when you set timelines and they agree to them and then start asking things like, can you get this done any sooner? I think having the conversation early on of this is what the timeline is, that's going to be a problem, then maybe I'm not the person for you, can save you both a lot of headache. So yeah, getting fired by a client sucks. And it is really easy to think, oh my gosh, that's never happened to anyone else. It's only me. And it's just because nobody's willing to talk about it. I'm so far on the other side of it now that I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever, it happens. It really sucked at the time. I learned a ton and I'm so grateful for that. And if somebody wants to not hire me now because I'm being open about something that happened in my business 6 years ago, then they're probably not my person anyway. So we've talked about firing a client, getting fired by a client. Here's the one that I think is sometimes the trickiest to navigate, which is when neither of you are technically in the wrong, but things are just not working and you kind of both mutually decide that we need to go our separate ways. So this one is the most recent of these 3 stories. Similarly to the client who I fired that I talked about a little while ago, the first story, this company was a referral from another client of mine who I had a fabulous time working with. And they are a product-based business, which if you've been listening to this show, you know I work with service providers. But like I said, they were a referral. The person who referred them, I had a really good rapport with. And I was like, you know what, sure, I'll get on a discovery call with them and we'll just chat and see if it's a good fit. And it seemed like it would be a good fit. I was really aligned with like their mission and their values. I thought their product was pretty cool. And I was excited to honestly just like kind of try something different. We did their discovery call. We did their strategy session. All the boxes were checked. Truly did not see any red flags. And maybe like these other 2 stories I told you, maybe in 5 years from now, I'll be able to look back and see, okay, I could have foreseen that. But until we got into the design phase, was pumped about this project. I thought it was going to be great. And they were too. I have multiple emails from them saying, oh my gosh, this is like so exciting. The strategy intensive we did was so great. It uncovered so much for us. I was exactly their ideal client for a myriad of reasons. So they were really grateful to have my perspective on things, which I appreciated. But once we got into the design phase of the project, things started to break down From their side, I think they just weren't liking what they were getting, or it wasn't what they were expecting or hoping for. And that's fine. That happens. Sometimes it's just like a stylistic incompatibility. And unfortunately, sometimes there's not a lot you can do about that. From my side, I think the problem was that they were struggling to stick to their strategy that we had laid out. They were constantly asking for something different. The really big thing here is that they kept wanting designs that were what they liked personally and not really taking into consideration what their audience would resonate with without trying to give like too much detail away. I will just tell you that they are for sure nowhere in the realm of being their own ideal client. So for them to say, oh, well, really, really like this, or this resonates with us, is good to know. And I want them to like their logo, but we're not designing it for them. We're designing it so that when their ideal client walks through a store, they see it on the shelf and pick it up and say, oh, what's this? And I think that was just something that for whatever reason, I was not really able to get them on board with. And that was really unfortunate. So at that point, we got through the logo design phase. I made them something that they, I guess, were happy with. To be perfectly honest, I was not happy at all with it, but the client wants what the client wants sometimes. And then we kind of just both mutually decided that, you know what, let's just call it here. You've got your branding. I think that you probably need to find somebody else to help you out with your website. And, you know, that's it. And it was a bummer. I would have loved to finish out the project, but I think we both just were feeling like this is just not working for us. So let's end the relationship now in a respectful way where we can both walk away like with our heads held high and feeling good about the way that we handled that. And I think that was the right move. I'm really glad that all of us were self-aware and mature enough to do that in a way that none of us got angry or there was no bad blood or anything like that. So that is honestly one of the things that I'm more proud of in my business over the last couple of years, as funny as it might sound. I think the lessons here are first and foremost that a lot of the times nobody is the bad guy. Nobody's at fault. Misalignment happens even when everyone has good intentions, even when you vet your clients really well, even when they check all the boxes and the vibes are good and all of that stuff. Sometimes things still just don't work out and it's okay. It doesn't have to be anybody's fault. Second, I would say, and this relates mostly to design, but I think you could apply it to any industry. When clients don't have a clear vision or they keep changing it or they don't want to stick to like the plan that you guys have laid out, the project is always going to feel unstable, and you as a service provider and them as a client are going to like feed off of that energy, and that is never good for anyone. And third, choosing to walk away, again, I've said this already, doesn't mean that you failed. In this case, this was the most professional way for me to handle this. They said so themselves. And it was the best thing I could do to tell them, okay, hey, this is obviously not working for either of us. I don't want you to continue paying me and continue getting things that you're not happy with. And for me, it was such a mental relief to know that like, okay, I don't have to keep doing this anymore. So a lot of times choosing to part ways when it's time to part ways is really the most professional decision that you can make. And I also want to talk here for a quick sec about contracts. So in my contract, I could have enforced that they had to pay me a percentage of whatever was left from their project. I have that in there for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to get into like contract law on this episode. But the thing about contracts is you get to choose whether and when to enforce them. So yes, I could have said, sure, we can stop the project, but you owe me another couple $1,000s. But I just didn't feel good about that. I had been paid for the work I had done so far, and I was fine in that specific instance with saying, yeah, we'll just call it here. You get all the files I've worked on. I'll keep all the money that you paid me so far, and no harm, no foul. We'll go our separate ways. That's not always going to be the case, but in this case, it was. So some red flags to watch out for in this scenario, I would have said, were clients who are too focused on themselves and not focused enough on their ideal client. People who are changing their mind a lot and giving you inconsistent feedback. Like one week they're like, oh, we really love this. And the next week they're saying, oh, actually, we want to change everything completely. And ones who, I don't want to say that the client did this because I don't think that's what they were intending to do, but kind of dismiss your professional recommendations or like ignore the plan or strategy that you agreed upon, I think is a big one. And unfortunately, I don't think any of those were things that I could have seen before I agreed to take on the project. So again, you know, sometimes you don't know until you know. And that's an unfortunate reality of doing business. But the real point that I want to make with this episode, and with talking about firing clients and getting fired and mutually parting ways is that these experiences happen to every single service provider, no matter how established and skilled they are. I promise you, every business owner out there has had an experience like one of these. They're just not talking about it because it's embarrassing. So when this happens to you, the best thing you can do is just learn from it. And I will say that I would recommend taking some time before you try to learn from these things. Like in the moment, it's fine to just say, you know what, that really sucked. Like today was not a good day. That's fine. You don't need to immediately get over it and start taking notes. But, a few weeks or a couple months down the road, try and objectively look back and say, okay, where did this go wrong and how can I avoid this happening for next time? And I'm pretty sure that there will be changes you can make to your process, things you can know to look out for future clients, any of those type of things that can help you improve your business. Every tough client situation teaches you something about your ideal client, your boundaries, your communication style, your process, all of those things so that you can make your business better. And I think 3 big words of wisdom that I would leave you with are, first and foremost, know your ideal client and only work with them. When you compromise it, or at least in my case, every time I've compromised it, it has almost always gone sideways. Second, and I know this is easier said than done, but don't take things personally. Like I said earlier, clients have a whole life that you don't know anything about. They leave for their own reasons, and you will probably never find out what those real reasons are. And third, holding your boundaries doesn't make you a jerk. It makes you a good business owner and a good leader. So firing a client, getting fired by a client, firing each other is rough, but it does not define your success. What defines your success is how you handle it, which should be with compassion, with integrity, and in a way that leaves you able to hold your head up high. Because at the end of the day, cheesy as it sounds, every failure is just feedback that gets you closer to the business that you've been trying to build. So if you have a firing story that you would be willing to share, shoot me a DM on Instagram and tell me all about it. I promise I won't share it with anyone, but I love chatting about the real, raw, vulnerable bits of business. And I think that this is one of the biggest ones that there is. Thanks for tuning in to the Six Figure Brand Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to rate the show and leave a review on whatever app you're listening on. And as a thank you, I'll send you coffee on me. Yes, I'm serious. As a smaller show for now, you taking the time to do this makes a huge impact on how we can reach more people and how I can continue to create this content for free. When you take a screenshot of your review, follow and tag me on Instagram at Spect&Co. I'll send you a $5 Starbucks gift card. As always, don't forget to check out the show notes for any links or resources I mentioned during the episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week.